If you don't know, Ableton Live was the first program to offer anything like warping or elastic audio flex mode, all that stuff. And basically what this does is it disconnects your pitch from your time. So let's say that I have this loop that's like a clock. You can hear that loop. A little bit quiet, but you can hear it. Turn it up for you. And I can take this loop and I can make it repitch. And if I slow down my tempo, if I slow down the tempo, you can hear the pitches going down. Right, you can hear that. And we could do that with like the footsteps here as well. So if I put these footsteps, their original tempo is 84 BPMs. And if I go ahead and put these in repitch mode, we can hear if I slow these down, here's what they sound like normally. It's like these Foley footstep things. If I slow them down, you hear how they kind of go down in pitch. And that's the way a normal sampler works, and we're going to talk about that more when we talk about sampling. That's like the basic way that sound works. It's not a special effect, it's just audio. And what Ableton Live did was they were the first program, like the first DAW, that let you adjust the speed of things without also adjusting the pitch of things. So I could take my footsteps and I can put them at 84. Here they are at 84. This is their normal tempo. And I can slow them down without changing the pitch. And I can speed them up without changing the pitch. So you can hear how that works. And that's just the normal kind of most basic way of doing warping. And that's what made Ableton Live really interesting in the beginning to everybody, because this is like nothing before this had come around. Like this is the first time anybody had seen something like this really that sounded so good and worked so flawlessly. And that's really what helped make Ableton so famous right like early on, was that it was like the first program that could really do this kind of stuff. So eventually Logic and Pro Tools added it into their programs, but it took a while. For a long time when you bought Pro Tools, you would actually get a very, very light version of Ableton Live that had 4 audio tracks, and you could load that in and you could use that with Pro Tools with Rewire turned on. And that was pretty cool. But eventually Pro Tools made their own Ableton Live, their own kind of version of it, which was elastic audio, and then they took the Ableton program out of the Pro Tools package. So that kind of helped a lot of people kind of get used to Ableton and understand it and stuff like that. So that's where we are. That's like the kind of history of all this. So Live was the first, and then Logic and Pro Tools. And right now, I would say that for me personally, Pro Tools sounds the best, Live sounds second best, and Logic sounds, their flex mode does not sound great. But that's not to say that Ableton doesn't sound good. It sounds great. It's just Pro Tools sounds fantastic. It's really, really good. But I think that Ableton Live is kind of the easiest to use as far as just dragging and dropping loops in. So if you are doing a lot of work with loops and producing stuff, Live is the fastest way to go. But Pro Tools is also getting there. But I prefer Live. So that's where we are right now, and what I've got here, I've got a session, I've got some MIDI files in here, and I've got some audio files over here that I can kind of play with it and show you what's going on here with this stuff. So let's take a look at these footsteps first of all. First of all, let me just play all this for you so you can hear what it sounds like. Turn these down a little bit, let's go. Okay, and that's with the loop. Everything sounds like together, and I've just kind of got this thing, just a little beat that I just made this morning, just to kind of mess around with for y'all. So let's take a look at the MIDI file over here. This MIDI clip, I'm going to stop everything, and we can play this. Now, as you know, with MIDI, if you want to move a note around, you can just grab it and move it around. And this is how MIDI has always been. It's just like this. So like, for example, I've got my kick drum here, and if I want my kick drum to have a different rhythm, I can just like copy and paste this, this drum note here. I could take this one out. Right, so I got that there. I can take this one back out again. Put that back. Right, so I got that there. Now, thing is, with audio works very different. If I go over here and look at my clock loop right here, so this is what the clock loop looks like, or my foot. Let's look at the footsteps. A little bit easier to look at. So here's what my footsteps look like, and the footsteps are they're here, but they're audio, so I can't separate out the different sounds. And if we look at like the percussion loop here, same thing. Here, let's listen to this. If I listen to the whole thing, right, so we can hear the different sounds happening, but they're not separated out as different notes as they are here in the MIDI. So you can see them happening in different places, but you can't really control, you can't like take certain things out and put certain things back in when they're on top of each other like this very easily. So if I want to move the rhythm around, here's what I can do with Ableton Live. First of all, I'm just going to stick a warp marker right over here at the end. So what that means is that it's going to lock in this part of the rhythm and this part of the rhythm right over here. So you can look on at 1 right here. And let me just zoom in on that. This one here. It locks that in, and over here on number 2, it locks that one in as well. So now what I can do is I can move everything around inside of this. And if I grab this one here and move it around, you can see everything stretches and moves around. So that's what warping does. Warping basically allows you to manipulate your rhythms, but it doesn't change your pitch. It doesn't adjust your pitch. And you can do this in Ableton Live. You can do it in real time. So for example, if I turn on my metronome here, turn on my metronome. There's my metronome. And I can double click to put a warp marker in. And you can see I can mess around with my rhythm. And I can change this rhythm around a lot. And if this is the one that you heard from the very beginning, this is just what you would think the rhythm is. Right? And what I can do is I can take all these warp markers back out again, holding down Shift, hit Delete, and there it is back into its original rhythm. And I can do this with all these different audio files here, these audio clips. Here they are. I'm just going to go ahead and put a warp marker here at the beginning of each one. Actually, what I'll do is I'll move this around to kind of mess with these. And what I'm doing is I'm holding down Shift and grabbing the transient. And I'm going to explain all this stuff in just a second. And I'm going to go ahead and delete these transients right here in the middle, because we don't need these transients. So now what I've got is I've just got a transient at the beginning of each downbeat. of the audio here. So you can see here's my transient right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this 1 to 1. Boom. And get rid of this one over here. And that's just kind of basically some house cleaning. But you can see here I can mess around with these. And I can move these around. If I want to straighten these out so they start right on the downbeat of each one, right? And you can hear when I do that, though, they're a little bit behind it. So I'm going to go ahead and put how it was lined up a second ago. So they're a little bit on top of things, but it sounds more on stuff. I can play this with my MIDI. And if I wanted to change my drum beat up, remember, I can. So you can see how I can quickly move stuff around. And that's MIDI. And that's the difference between MIDI and audio in here, is that the audio, I can move it around, but I can't grab individual little sounds from this unless I somehow turn it into MIDI. Which right now it's not really easy to separate the notes, the different sounds out. So with MIDI, I can go ahead and I could just take this kick out entirely. Right? And I don't have that kick at all. Or I could take out my hi-hat entirely. Let's take out both of these hi-hats. Right, so I've got that same loop, but without the hi-hat. And I can duplicate this loop. Right. And this is something you cannot do with audio. You can't duplicate the loop like you can. Like you can still put stuff together, but in the session view, you can't really work with it like that. So that's some kind of the differences between how audio and MIDI work and starting to get into warping. So again, with these footsteps here, let's just go ahead and I'm just going to pull these down and let them play by themselves. I can move these over like this. And I can change my warp type, like how the warp mode, to be different, and it's going to change how this beat sounds. You can hear how that sounds there. I can change it to tones mode. Or textured mode. I could put it into Complex Pro mode. So you can hear the slight variations with this. Okay, and we're going to come back and talk about those different modes in just a second here. But that's basically what warping allows us to do. So I can move the audio around, I can do it in real time, but I cannot separate out the different sounds. So that's the limitations of it. It's amazing Warping is fantastic, it's awesome, but it's not all powerful. So you have to understand your limitations. And what's really important with this stuff is that you work with this enough to really figure out your limitations and figure out what you can and can't do. And the other thing that's really important that I want you to kind of make sure that you get your head around is these different warp modes. And again, the only way to do this is just by practicing with this stuff every day. So let's go ahead and take a look at our notes. Okay, so a couple things with these clips is inside the clip you have a couple different things here, transients and warp markers. And the difference between a transient and warp marker is a transient is this. You see these little triangles? This is the transient. And if you remember in Pro Tools, you have the analysis view and you have the warp view on each track. You can look at each track with the analysis view and the warp view. And the analysis just shows you your transients and where Pro Tools thinks the transients are. And the warp actually allows you to move things around. And it's the same thing with Ableton Live. With Ableton Live, you've got your transients here, and then over here on the right, you've got a warp marker here. And the only difference is they're in the same view. So you're not switching different windows to see different things. The transient is not changing the audio. That's really important to understand. The transient here, this little line here, this doesn't change the rhythm of the audio. If I wanted to change the rhythm of the audio, I'd have to double click and insert a warp marker. I'm going to put one here and here. And now this part in the middle, I can move this around. And what I just did was I just turned off my grid mode. So it's basically in slip mode like Pro Tools, so I can move it around freely. If I turn the grid mode on, my grid now, it snaps it into the grid, right? If I just turn that off with Command 4, and I can move that around. Okay. If I double click it, it will take away the warp marker. If I double click it again, it will put the warp marker back. So you double click it and it takes it away. Over here I can take it away, I can take it away. Or I can double click and put it there, put one there. And see how when I mouse over it, it kind of like changes what it looks like there? You can double click to add it in like that. Okay. Now another way to add in a warp marker is to click somewhere on here, like this one here, and hit Command I. And that inserts a warp marker. And I can insert a warp marker anywhere I want by double clicking, double click to remove it. I could double click right here to insert a warp marker, or I can just click and hit Command I, whatever I want to do. And that just kind of changes how quick you're working with stuff, all that. Okay, so I got that there. And if I want to move several warp markers around, I can hold down Shift, or I can just drag across them like this. And now, let me see here, hold on a second. Let's put warp markers in on these three here. Let's say I want to move these two around right here. I can just highlight them by clicking and dragging across, and you see how they're highlighted in black. And now I can move them around by, shift clicking. The highlight thing doesn't work the right way. Let's put one here. Shift click, boom, and now you can see I can move those two around. That's really useful if you want to just move a portion of the rhythm of a clip and not the whole rhythm of a clip. Okay. So another cool little shortcut is you can move left and right by transient by option clicking the arrows. So for example, and if you use Pro Tools a lot, this is like the tab to transient thing in Pro Tools, but what I can do is I can click on this one and I can hold down option and use my arrows on my keyboard, and it will move by my transients here. And you notice that it's not associating this one here in the middle. There's one right here that I would also call a transient. So I'm going to go ahead and put a transient right there, Command Shift I to insert a transient, and now I can move by that one as well. One difference between Pro Tools and Ableton Live is that the engine for detecting transients, I think, is better in Pro Tools than it is in Ableton Live. I often find that Ableton kind of puts a transient in weird places, or sometimes it doesn't put a transient where I think there should be one or whatever. So for example, if we look over here, right here there's a transient right here. that's a strange place to put a transient in my opinion. So I would want to move this transient back to the beginning here. And the way that I do that is by holding down Shift and dragging the transient over. And now I can put that transient where I want it to be. Why does, so this Landon says, why does Complex Pro not allow you to repurchase the clip while using it? Just curious what's going on there. What do you mean repurchase? Repitch? I think you put I think that's a mistyping of the word there. You mean repitch the clip? Repitch. Well, so most of these don't allow you to repitch the clip. Only repitch actually pitches the clip. Well, that's not true. Actually, here, if we put in Complex Pro over here, sorry, transpose. No, you're fine. Transpose is actually more the correct word. Repitch is the mode here. But yeah, so I've got Complex Pro here, and I can go over here to my transpose, and I can change that pitch. Or I can transpose it up. And a cool little shortcut in Ableton Live, since we're talking about transposing stuff. Yeah, I work at SAE. A cool little trick we can use for transposing stuff is hold down the Shift key and use your up and down arrows, and that'll transpose by an octave. And this is, so if I want to transpose by just like 1 or 2 semitones, I can just use my arrow keys up and down. But if I hold down Shift, I can go up and down here like this by octaves. And that's a pretty cool little trick that a lot of people don't really know. And it's also, just since we're talking about it, this also works for, it also works, hold on, let me turn on my, sorry, I want to use MIDI. Turn on my synth here. So it also works for keyboard sounds and stuff like that. So for example, just a real quick little aside. Yeah, it works for vocals. It works for everything. So if I have like a synth in here, let's go ahead and just stick a synth in here. Analog. Let's use not analog. Let's use a key sound. Keyboards. And here, we'll use this one. So I have this one here. Is this gonna work? Are you gonna work, synth? Hold on a second. Let's see. I don't have a like a arm for my camera over my synth yet, so I'm gonna get one of those. But let's go ahead and turn the sub 37. Oh, I know why. There we go. Okay, cool. So I have this synth sound here. Take the cables off of it. This piano sound. So let's say I record something in here. I'm going to record this in real quick. Okay, so I have this here. And if I want to take all these notes and transpose them up an octave, I can just highlight them, Command A to highlight, and use my Shift and Shift arrow keys. Hold on, let's make it a little bit louder. Sorry, I made it too soft. Okay, and if I want to transpose it down an octave, just make sure they're all highlighted, hold down your Shift key and hit the down arrow. I agree, Kishan, that synth sounds super relaxing, yep. And this one here is from one of the instruments that comes with Live Suite called Collision. Collision? Yeah, collision, this one here. Yep. Live 9 absolutely does transpose in Complex Pro. I mean, I've been using Complex Pro for years, and it's always, you must be doing something weird. Something's going on, because it definitely has this transpose feature over here on the left. Let's see. Let's see if I can find an example on, because I don't have Live 9 anymore. But you should also upgrade to Live 10. Live 9 Complex Pro Transpose. Is there an image? Yeah, there it is, right there. Boom. So something funky is going on with your setup. If you don't see this, this is Live 9. And you can see we're in Complex Pro right here. And then it's set, and there's a transpose thing here. So if you, yeah, it's really weird. Mono says, thanks for doing free lessons, man. Actually, it's not free. I'm getting paid for this, and there's a whole class going on. But you're welcome. It's nice that you can join us. So Landon says, that's so strange. Yeah, actually, Landon, let's talk about this in Zoom later on, because I'd be interested to see how you're using it, because apparently it seems to me like you're probably setting something weird, and it's like just a thing where I can just be like, oh, that's why it's like this, like this, like this. I've probably experienced it before. But let's talk about it in Zoom later. Yeah, so I can see your screen and everything. Cool. All right, so we got this here. So that's how the MIDI would do that. Now, in the audio, again, the audio can transpose this. Now, once again, this, and it's really important to understand this, is that whenever you transpose audio, you're also using warp mode. The warp is not just about your rhythms, but it's also about your pitch. And the really important thing to keep in mind is that warp, really what it does is it disconnects the pitch from the timing of things. So in normal, natural audio sampling and stuff like that, your pitch is connected to your audio. And here, let me just give you an example of that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to sample my voice saying hello, check, 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 1, 2. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and record my voice in over here. I'm just going to make a new track. Let's color that a greenish color. And audio 2, blah, 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 check, 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 1, 2. Yep, okay, I got a signal there. Hey, hey, hey. So I'm just going to record myself. Hello. All right. So we got that little recording there. And we can listen back to that real quick.
Hello.
There it is. Great. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to edit this down real quick. I'm going to turn the warp off, and I'm just going to crop it real quick. Just move that like that, and like that. There we go. And we're going to right click and crop. There we go. So now.
Hello.
Okay. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to put this into a sampler. And the easiest way to do it really is just create a MIDI track and drag the sample into the spot where it says drop instrument here, and it creates a MIDI track for you. And now we can go over here and we can say, whoa, hey, hello, down an octave.
Hello.
There I am. Okay.
Hello.
So if I play this with my keyboard,
Hello. 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 Hello.
right, I can play that with my keyboard. And if I go down on my keyboard here, like down the octave,
Hello. 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 Hello.
right? And that's how a normal sampler reacts. And next 2 weeks from now, I'm going to bust out my MPC Live, and we're going to talk about samplers, and you're going to see how this works in the real world.
Hello. Hello.
But that's how this is. And so when I started doing this back in the 90s, when I was using nothing but hardware, this is all you had access to. You could,
Hello. 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 Hello.
right? So that's how this works. But if I turn on my warp down here, turn that on, and I'm going to put it into, not that mode. Wait, where are we? Here. If I put it into Complex Pro, so now you can hear,
Hello.
that's my normal sample, but if I go down the octave,
Hello. 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 Hello.
There we go. I can start making it sound pretty good if I mess with my formants and my envelope. Right? And if I go up the octave, I want to kind of mess with these a little bit. Yeah, MPC Live is cool. It's dope. We could talk about it in a couple weeks. Right? So you can hear. Right? Sounds pretty good. But it's just as fast as it was. It's the same speed. So what it's done is essentially it's basically disconnecting the pitch, the timing from the pitch. And that's the important part to remember, because what that means is that not only can I mess with the pitch without changing the timing, I can also mess with the timing without changing the pitch. And so what we're doing here is, I can also mess with the pitch, I can mess with the pitch, yeah, without adjusting the timing. That's what we're basically doing here when we're playing it, right? Or I can mess with the timing without, vice versa. I think I'm saying it right. So that's an important thing to remember here. So with this piano part here, for example, let's put the footsteps back into it. So I got this here, but if I wanted to mess with this rhythm of the footsteps, so I have that right there, and I can bring the clock loop in here. Right. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this clock loop here, and I'm just going to grab a little part of it that I want. I'm just going to grab this little bit right here. I don't want the whole thing. So there we go. So I don't want that snare drum in there. Now with this clock loop, again, if I want to mess with the rhythm in this, just grab these here. I'm going to move these around a little bit so they're right on the here. Let's insert I'm going to insert a transient marker right there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these around here. I'm going to double click on this one. I'm just going to move it over so it's right there. I'm going to take this one and move it over so it's right there. And I'm going to move these over so they're right on, but I can mess with my rhythm a little bit here now. So I got this. So now and I'm going to play with this a little bit as well. Take this over here. Get rid of that one there. There we go. Cool. Let's move some of these over as well. And I can adjust the start point as well. And things start to get a little bit more interesting now. You just kind of keep messing around with things. And so, absolutely, there's a lot of fidelity loss. But we'll come back to that. We haven't quite gotten there yet. But what I'm showing you here is a couple things. One, I can move my loop part around the audio sample here, And I can also move the start point of the audio sample right here. So this little flag here changes the start point right there. So we can move this around here like this, and it's changing my rhythm up considerably. So just listen to this rhythm here. I'm going to turn my metronome on. Hear how that changes the rhythm a lot? That's kind of cool there. And we can bring our MIDI stuff back in over here. Right here. And if we remember this loop before, when I first played it, it sounded like this. Everything was very straight. And it sounds cool like this, but this here definitely fits together in an interesting way. So let's go back. To where are we? Here. Yep. Okay. So so this is just talking about that stuff. Create a warp marker. Double click on a transient. Double click the top half of the wave. These are two ways to create the warp marker. And then you can also lock and move warp markers by holding down Command. So this is a really cool thing. I've got my footsteps here. Here's my footsteps. If I wanted to move, let's see here. Let me get rid of these warp markers in the middle here. If I wanted to just move this one right here, 1.3, this one here, well, what I can do is I can hold down Command, and you see what it does. It kind of puts these like ghost warp markers on either side. See those like kind of where the transients are? And so if I hold this down, Command, and I click on this and move it back and forth, left and right, it automatically locks those other transients into place. This is a really cool feature that allows you to kind of quickly grab certain markers and move them around really easily without like worrying about what's on either side. The other option for this is to double click the ones on either side, double click, and now move it. But just by holding down Command, we can save ourselves that time without having to worry about stuff. So that's a really cool little feature right there. Telescoping. Telescoping is what happens when you adjust a transient when there is no warp marker to the right of that transient. I don't really want to go into too much detail. I'm just going to show it to you real quick. It's a weird concept, and I'm just going to show it to you real quick. I'm not going to sit around and struggle with it though, because it's something you kind of have to understand about a little bit more about warping first before you can wrap your head around telescoping. But if I show you, see if I grab this one here, what happens is all the other warp markers are moving in relationship to that first warp marker. So if I grab this last one over here, it's moving them all, but I could also grab the very first one here and it's moving them all as well. That's a thing called telescoping. Ableton Live, Logic, and Pro Tools both do it. I don't know about Logic. Let's see here. When you press Command, can you drag your transient? Command, you drag your transient. Does the audio before that become slowed down, or does the pitch change? It's gonna. Well, so here, let's listen. I'll show you. I'm gonna put this back into space like this. So I got this here. So if I hold down Command and move it, so you can hear it change, but it's really what it's doing is messing with the rhythm, not the pitch. In order for it to change the pitch, you'd have to put it into a different warp mode, which we're going to get to in just a second. But basically, all of them just are messing. They're not changing the pitch of things. They're just changing the rhythm of things. Okay. All right. Let's go back over here, and If you want to move your transient, for example, I want to move this transient around right here. I hold down Shift. I already explained this, but I'm just going to explain it one more time. I hold down Shift and move that transient around like that, and I can move it to a better part of the waveform. Usually you want your transient to be kind of on the beginning of things, and like I said, Ableton Live doesn't get it right enough, actually. It's kind of annoying, but all right. Now, a couple things about this in the arrangement view is that if I have this footsteps in my arrangement view over here, let's go ahead and copy that and put it in here into the footsteps into the arrangement view. There it is. And I've got this, say I've got a 4-bar loop. That's a 3-bar loop. Yeah, let's make it a 2-bar loop. So what I can do is if I hold down Shift, watch what happens to my cursor. See that little, it's hard to see, but there's a little arrow that appears. There's a little arrow that appears in my cursor here. I don't know if you can see that right there. But what I can do is if I hold down Shift and I drag it with that arrow, click and drag, it stretches out the clip. So let me just do it without that. So if I just click and drag without the little arrow, it's just going to make a loop out of that clip. It just automatically loops it. And this is like an Ableton Live thing. Ableton Live thing is it loops stuff unless you tell it not to loop stuff. Whereas Pro Tools and Logic do not loop stuff. They trim unless you tell them not to trim. But Ableton Live kind of, it trims it if you do this, or it loops it if you do this. It's an interesting hybrid. But if I don't want to loop it, I just want to stretch it, I can hold down my Shift key and it gets that little arrow and I can move it over like that. This is something that's new in Live 10. This was not in Live anything before Live 10. Says, oh hi, Mark says, I love the sound of the digital drum clip on drums in the channel, but is there a way to get the exact same sound without clipping the channel? I'd have to go in and listen to it. Actually, we're kind of talking about like just right now. We're talking about elastic audio stuff. That's a little bit off topic for us. I want to keep going with elastic audio stuff. But yeah, is there a way to get the exact same sound without clipping the channel? I mean, maybe just turn the output down. If you're getting the sound from within the effect, and if there's a way to turn the output down. I don't really use the drum digital clip. Are you talking about? You're talking about probably the Redux? I don't know. We could talk about it later. But let's keep going talking about this elastic audio stuff here. So that's a really cool feature. I don't know if a lot of people really realize that's in there, this one here. So what this sounds like is like this. It makes it basically, I just made it twice as long. I just stretched everything out. I can put it back, right? Or I can drag it over. And that's just holding down the Shift key. And that's something that's, Pro Tools does it. I believe Logic does it, but Ableton Live definitely does it as well. All right, and then you can also move the audio within the clip by holding down Option and Shift and drag the audio in the bottom half of the clip. So let's say that I have this clock loop here. Let's use this one that's just straight ahead. This one, yep. So I'm going to put that in here down where it says clock loop. Paste that in, and I'm going to move that around. Now, I've got this loop here. Let's go ahead and hit play on this. And if I wanted to, I can hold down Option and Shift, and now you'll see that what happens is my cursor becomes a little pointer finger. And what I can do is I can click and drag, and it keeps the loop in place, but it's dragging the audio through the clip. So now, and you can see it's kind of weird because it's like I don't have my grid turned on right now. So let's go ahead and turn that grid back on, and let's make that grid. Yeah, it's right. So now it's set to 8th notes, so I can move this around by the 8th notes, and I can see what it's doing. If I zoom out a little bit, And you can listen for different parts of the loop that you like. So this is really cool if I've got a long loop, a long like audio clip that I'm looping just a small part of it, and I can move things around to see, like to listen to what sounds the best. So I can hold down Option and Shift to do that. That's kind of cool. And I can take that and and put this back over here. And I can move this around I can pitch it down. And now instead of having a clock sound, we've got this really cool kind of ambient background noise that's this rhythmic noise. And what we could do with this is, here, let's mess with our filter here. Right, that gives it a nice cool little sound there. So you can see how easy it is to kind of get creative with this and kind of mess with your samples and stuff like that. Super, super dope. So let's take this, and so I've been doing this, and I did this one in the arrangement view. So if I like that loop, but I want to bring it back to my session view, all I do is just hit Command-C, copy it, go over here, and paste it. And I'm just going to rename it Clock Loop 2, like that. So now I can see it's a different part of the loop than what these are over here. So I've got this one here from the original one. I got this one here. That's one that I kind of messed around with. Well, this is actually the original one. Sorry, this is right, but that's got that snare drum like that. I've got this one here. And you can hear the delay I've got on it because I sent it over to my delay. I've got like a delay happening over here as well. So that's why it's got that extra rhythm in it now. Okay. But we're going to go ahead and turn all that stuff off and just keep that Clock Loop 2 there because why not? Got my electric piano still doing its thing. All right, so now let's go back over to this view here and let's talk a little bit about the warp details, okay? So you can only loop clips that have warp enabled. This is like a big thing that threw me off in the very beginning. A long time ago when I first started using Ableton Live, which was almost 20 years at this point. I've been using it basically since it first came out. And one of the things that threw me off when I started messing around with loops and stuff was that you can only loop when warp is turned on. So that's a really important detail that maybe you didn't notice even if you've been using Live for a while. Maybe you just never turned warp off. But just when you do, be aware that if you want to loop something, you have to have warp turned on. You cannot, if I turn warp off, the loop also turns off right there. Okay, if I turn loop off, I can turn that on and off, but once I turn warp off, I can no longer turn my loop back on. So be aware of that. Any audio that is long enough will be warped by default when you drag it in. The default mode of Ableton Live is to warp stuff. That is the default mode. So when you drag in a loop, anything that's like over 2 beats long, I think will probably get warped. I don't know what the exact limit is, but Ableton Live sometimes does make mistakes where it tries to warp something that you don't really want it to be warped, or it doesn't warp something that you do want to be warped or looped or whatever. So just be aware that you're going to run into that when you start dragging stuff in. Usually it works fine, but every now and then you might want to turn the warp off or turn it on or something like that. Okay, so warp modes. There are different warp modes. These are right here. Beats, tones, textures, repitch, complex, and complex pro, and they all live right over here. Every single audio file that you drag into Ableton Live is going to have this section here that's called sample. And this is where you get some information about the audio clip. So this right here tells you what the name of the audio clip is. So you can also see down at the bottom, hold on, let me see if I can get my screen to be more, there we go. So down here in the bottom, you see across the bottom of the screen there that line of text is flashing on and off when I mouse over it. Well, that line is called the info line or info pane or whatever they call it, info window, I don't know. But basically it shows you information about certain things in Live. So if I like highlight a section of the song, it tells me, or my clip, it tells me how much is highlighted, the time selection, stuff like that. If I mouse over this, it tells me where that thing lives on my hard drive. So we can find it like right there. This right here tells me, and I could right click on it and I can show it in my Finder, I can show it in the browser, I can manage it, which means I can go and change the name and stuff like that as well. Over here it tells me what the sample rate is, what the bit depth is, and how many channels it is, if it's stereo or mono. That's what this is telling me right here. Then I have this edit button here, which opens up an external editor if I wanted to, if you have one. I've used Live for a long time. Most of my friends who use Live, none of us really use this edit button ever. I don't know very many people who do. I'm sure there are people who swear by it, who they're like, I use the edit button all the time. Great, good for you. I'm happy for you. Let's have a party sometime about it. But I don't use it. My friends don't use it. I have plenty of friends who've never touched it. So if you're not touching that button, don't feel left out. You're fine, but you can have a party with that other person who does touch it all the time. The save button. This will save, if I make changes, like if I move this, I can save this into a clip, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. I can reverse it, that flips it backwards. I can high quality, which you want to keep on all the time. There's no reason to turn that off ever anymore. That's like an old school thing that for computers that used to not be so powerful, Live made a way that you could make it so it would save CPU power. I don't think that's a thing anymore. I don't know. All the computers are really powerful now. So the fade, this puts a little fade on the edges of the clip, so it cuts out any kind of pops or clicks. I turn that off by default. You can load the clip into your RAM of your computer. If you have a giant session, this is mostly for live stuff. If you have a giant session with tons and tons of clips that you're going to be using, you might want to turn the RAM on to save a lot of those into your RAM so they load up faster and they launch better. It saves a little bit of speed on launching clips. You got, sorry, let the truck pass by. 6th Avenue's being loud right now. Then you've got transpose, then you've got your gain, then you've got your detune, which is the same as transpose, just in smaller little increments. Transpose is for semitones, and detune is for synths, which is like detuning things. And then over here is your warp section. Let's talk about this. We're going to come right back to this here. Here's your loop here, and the loop has two numbers in it. It's got the position where the loop starts and how long the loop is. So these are set up in the same way all the time in Ableton Live. This first button is your bars, the second button is your beats, and the third button, window is your 16th notes. So if I want this loop to be 2 beats long, I would put a 0.2.0 and hit enter, and now my loop is 2 beats long. That little 2 right there says it's 2 beats long. And I can see it starts at position -144. And you might be like, why is there a minus? Well, the reason why there's a minus is because you can see my 1, I readjusted it so it starts right here on this first little thing, just to make it easier for me to look at and to see what's going on. So if I move my loop over like that, let's put that right on the 1. Boop, there we go. Now you can see the position is 111, which is the downbeat of everything. That's the downbeat. So that's where my loop position is. I can adjust that. I can move that around. There it is. You can see it's moving around. Now, when this number is red, what that means is it's not exactly on. So if I turn my grid back on, I have my grid off, and I set it to 16th notes, when I move it around, it's going to be exactly on the 16th notes most of the time. But when it's off the 16th notes, you can see that number turns red, and it's letting it go between 16th notes. So that's what this loop thing is right here. I'm going to go ahead and put this back at the beginning and set it back to a 1-bar loop. There we go. Hit 1 and hit enter. And then up here is my start position. The start position is wherever this flag right here is. So if I put it right there, it's in 2. If I turn my grid back on, see, I can move it around. And this is a cool thing. And like if you have a really long clip, and you know exactly where you wanted to put it, you could type the number in right there and hit enter, and it goes to the right place. Okay, so there's this start and loop. Now let's get to the good stuff. Here we are with our warp, and kind of going back to what we just read in the notes. Let me just move the screen down a little bit. There we go, like this. There we go, cool. Okay, make it a little bit easier to see for y'all. We have 6 different warp modes: beats, tones, texture, repitch, complex, and complex pro. Let's do a little recording so I can show you how these things work. And now we're getting back to what Monono said earlier. Monono said earlier, it should be noted that there is artifact and fidelity loss when using warp versus repitching. And yes, there absolutely is, and we're going to talk about that right now. But first, before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and hit this, and I'm going to do a little counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Got the counting there, and I'm just going to say some stuff. Counting. I'm counting right now. I'm counting in rhythm. It's really cool. I'm counting in rhythm. Oh my gosh, that's dope.
Counting right now. Counting in rhythm. It's really cool. I'm counting in rhythm. Oh my gosh, that's dope. Counting.
Right? Even though I'm lying there because I'm not actually counting, I'm just saying the word counting, which doesn't count as the same thing, right? No, I don't think so. Okay. So now I've got this here, and you can see there it is. Now, going back to these things over here, if I wanted to make this louder, I can adjust my gain. There, see how the waveform is getting bigger? I can adjust my gain.
Counting. I'm counting right now.
And you can hear that it's, louder. Right? I can, if I click on it and I hit delete, it'll go back to its default setting. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my EQ8. I'm just going to copy it over from one of my other tracks, so I'm not got all that low frequency stuff in there.
Counting right now. Counting. It's really cool. Counting in rhythm. Oh my gosh, that's dope. Counting.
Right, there we go.
Right now. I'm counting in rhythm. It's really cool. I'm counting in rhythm.
Now I can put kind of effects on here. Let's put a little compressor on here, just kind of make it smooth it out there. I'm just going to put this glue compressor on there. I got my EQ to cut out some stuff.
Counting. I'm counting right now. I'm counting in rhythm.
There we go, smooth
It's
it
really
out.
Cool. I'm counting in rhythm. Oh my gosh, that's dope. Counting. I'm counting right now.
There we go. Okay, so I just smoothed it out. Now, you can hear there's a lot of the air noises and stuff in there. I can't get rid of those with any kind of plugins or anything like that. It's just in there. We're just going to have to listen to it. Sorry. Not sorry. So I've got this. Now, if I want to start messing with the timing of this, let's go ahead and put our footsteps or something in here.
Counting. I'm counting right now. I'm counting in rhythm.
Put my footsteps straight.
It's really cool. I'm counting in rhythm. Oh my gosh, that's dope. Counting. I'm counting right now. I'm counting in rhythm. It's really cool. I'm counting in rhythm. Oh my gosh, that's dope. Counting. I'm counting
Okay,
right.
so I got this here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to mess. I got this little rhythm going behind me, and I'm going to mess with my rhythm here. So what I'll do is right now, if I just grab one of these transients and move it, it's going to telescope. See how it's telescoping? Everything is moving. Wait, why were you not telescoping? I command you to. There we go. Now it's telescoping. Right, and if I push play on this.
Counting. I'm counting now. I'm counting in rhythm. It's really cool. I'm counting in rhythm. Oh my gosh, that's dope.
Right, now that's kind of weird sounding. The reason why it's weird sounding is because my warp mode over here is wrong for a vocal. What I want to do is choose the correct warp mode for whatever I'm working with here. And this goes back to what Mono was saying, or Monano, or whatever your name is. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce it. But here is beats, tones, textures, repitch, complex, and complex pro. And it's really important that you understand how each one of these works, because if you want it to sound natural, you're going to have to pick the right warp mode. If you don't want it to sound natural, you're going to have to experiment. And the more you play with these warp modes, the more quicker you're going to be at producing stuff, because you're going to say, I have this sound in my head, and I want it to sound like this type of thing. oh, that's probably that warp mode that I used the other day. So you can put it right there, and you don't have to like sift through everything quite as much. And that's why it's super important to learn all these. So for example, if I want this to sound very natural, I'm going to go over here to my Complex Pro because it's a voice, and I'm going to mess around with it. And so now if I just go in here,
Counting. I'm counting right now. It's really cool. I'm counting in rhythm. Oh my gosh, that's dope. I'm counting. I'm counting right now. I'm counting in rhythm. It's really cool. I'm counting in rhythm. Oh my gosh, that's dope.
right? And that sounds pretty good. Now, if I'm listening to it just by itself, I would say, wow, there's something weird about that. But it does sound pretty darn good because I'm speeding it up a lot. And if I wanted to take this and slow it down,
Counting. I'm counting right now. I'm counting in rhythm. It's real counting.
and you can hear I can slow it way down. Now, if I want to slow it way down, I could also pitch it way down and give it kind of that chopped and screwed feel.
Counting. I'm counting right now. I'm counting in rhythm.
Cool, let's put this back to its original. I'm just hitting Command Z a whole bunch of times. Okay. So there's that. Now, if I wanted to keep this rhythm, but I just wanted to adjust the pitch, I could change my formants here and go down with the transpose.
Counting. I'm counting right now. I'm counting in rhythm. It's really cool. I'm counting in rhythm. Oh my gosh, that's dope. Counting. I'm counting right now.
Right, and you can hear that sounds pretty cool. What I can do though is I can also make it all chipmunky sounding. Put it up here.
Counting. I'm counting right now. I'm counting in rhythm. It's really cool. I'm counting in rhythm. Oh my gosh, that's dope. Counting. I'm counting right now.
And now I've got chipmunk voice. Okay, so you can mess around with the pitch and stuff like that, but you've got to choose the right warp mode, because if I use a different warp mode, here, let's put it back, and let's use a different warp mode.
Counting. I'm counting right now. I'm counting in rhythm. It's really cool. I'm counting in rhythm.
Right, that sounds completely wrong. It sounds cool, I think. It sounds like, you know, your computer's glitching, but it doesn't sound natural at all. And that's because I'm using the wrong warp mode. Here, let's use a different warp mode here and check that out.
Counting. I'm counting right now. I'm counting in rhythm. It's really cool.
Right, you can hear the artifacts in there.
Counting. I'm counting right now. I'm counting in rhythm. It's really cool. I'm counting in rhythm. Oh my gosh, that's dope. Counting. I'm counting right now. I'm counting in rhythm. It's really cool. I'm counting in rhythm. Oh my gosh, that's dope. Counting.
Right, and that sounds cool as well, but it doesn't sound natural. Repitch isn't really going to do anything
Counting. I'm counting right now.
because repitch is tied to the tempo, and so it's not going to do anything there. Complex is cool. It's not great for voice though.
Counting. I'm counting right now. I'm counting in rhythm. It's really cool. I'm counting in rhythm. Oh my gosh, that's dope.
Right, really for vocal stuff, the Complex Pro is the best. For songs, full songs, I think Complex is better than Complex Pro. Complex Pro is, I think, a little bit sounds more natural for vocal stuff. Okay, and that's like kind of a rundown of this stuff. Now, this is a vocal. Let's apply this over here to like a loop or something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 606 drum loop. I'm going to turn these hi-hats back on. And I'm going to actually put a, hold on, let's, I'm going to put, I put a, what did I do? Hi-hat. Just open. I put a filter on it, that's what I did. I'm going to put a filter on this hi-hat as well to get rid of that kind of, there's like a low click in there. Cool. Hear that like really hard click that's in there. Yeah, there we go. All right, so now what I'm going to do is, now I got that kind of taken care of, I'm going to go ahead and freeze and flatten this. Right-click and choose Freeze. So I right-click on the track and choose Freeze, and what I'm doing is I'm turning this into audio. And I want to turn this into audio because I want to, there we go. I want to have an audio version of it. So now I have an audio version of it, and I also have a MIDI version of it. And what I did was I just turned it into audio, and I dragged it over. I held down Option, dragged it onto a new, I right-clicked and froze it, and then I made a new audio track. And I held down Option and dragged it onto that audio track there. So now I've got an audio version of this. So there we have that. Now, with this audio version, I can't turn my kick off. I can't do stuff like that. I can't remove notes from it. I can change the pitch. I mean, I can change the pitch, I can change the rhythm around, but I can't remove just that note. I can't just say, like, I just don't want the snare drum very easily. There are kind of ways you can do it, but it's not easy in this case. So what I'm going to do here, though, is I'm going to adjust the rhythm. I'm going to slow it down. And I'm going to show you what it sounds like with different warp modes with this beat. So I'm going to take it down to 60. And you can hear all these artifacts in here. So let's go ahead and let's change these different warp modes and listen to what it sounds like super slow like this. Tone sounds like that. Can change my grain size. Doesn't sound great. Texture. Same thing. Sounds cool, but it doesn't sound natural. Then I've got my repitch, which is going to pull it down a ways. Not quite an octave, but down a ways. And then I've got complex, which is going to sound pretty good, but you're still going to hear weirdness on the beginning. And complex pro, which again, it sounds okay, but it doesn't sound amazing. Really the best thing to use for this would be beats mode and turn off your looping. And that sounds really good right there. And if I add in my other sounds back into this, it's going to sound, we're going to, that sounds pretty good. So what's happening here when we talk about beats mode and all these different modes? These different modes are your different algorithms for how the computer interprets the sound. And I think it's fairly important that you understand how these work. I kind of just blundered around for a very long time, just for like a few years, just kind of messing with stuff and just playing with stuff. And I think that's like, you know, it's good and bad. It's good because it's really good to experiment with stuff and mess around and try things out. It's bad because it took me a very long time to understand these, and you might want to get this going faster than a couple of years. I was just kind of like messing around with stuff and trying things out. I wasn't really that concerned about time at that point in my life. So I was just like, yeah, I'm just going to learn this stuff and mess around with it. And it was the beginning of Ableton Live, so everybody was just kind of messing around with stuff. Nowadays, people have been in it, they've been doing it for a while, so you have a lot of catching up to do if you haven't really used it so much yet. And that's really what this, understanding this stuff is really going to help you with that. I'm going to go ahead and pull my live screen over like this. We don't need that anymore. So let's take a look at what each one of these does. So beats mode, what beats mode does is it breaks up your sample, your clip, into individual samples based on your transient markers. So for example, see how my vocal over here, counting, wait, I'm counting. This one here is that, and this one is just counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so notice how this vocal sample here has a bunch of transient markers all over the place. And that's because Ableton Live gets really confused with vocals and stuff because there's like a lot of hard transients in a vocal. If I listen to this, we can hear what it's sounding like. I'm going to turn off my mic here so I don't see that doing.
Counting. I'm counting right now. I'm counting in rhythm. It's really
cool. I'm counting in rhythm.
Right? And you can see there's like transient markers all over the place. They're just like everywhere because it's like counting, counting, counting. Those are two transients right there. So transient markers don't really work for vocals. But if we look at our drum loop here, we can see there's a transient marker that's very defined for every single drum hit. Boom, 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 boom. And that's because transients really are a drum thing. It's really about the drums. So it's really a drum thing that's it's about the drums, and that's where they fit up best. But not just drums, and we're going to see that here in just a second. I'm going to put a bass line in here that's going to sound really cool as well. So, or well, it's going to sound. You're going to hear what I mean. And also pianos and stuff. So I can take this piano line and do the same thing with it. So for this, the beats mode works really, really well because what the beats does is it takes your transient. These little red dots here are the transient markers. And these triangles here are your drum hits. That's what they look like. Okay, thanks for letting me know, Luther. Sorry about your grandma. So we got this here, and each one of these gets cut up by the transient. So first of all, Ableton Live detects what the transients are, and then it says, okay, here's a transient, here's a transient, here's a transient, here's a transient. Over here, we can see here, there's my transients right here, where these little triangles, these little gray triangles are. There they are. Boom, 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 boom. And it treats each one of those as its own separate sample, as its own separate little box of a sample. So when I slow it down, it doesn't try to stretch the box. It literally just takes the boxes and it keeps the box the same length and it puts the box in a different place timing-wise. So if I go in here, let's put it back to its normal tempo, 92. Here's this. Solo it. So now if I slow it down, it's going to take those boxes that it has for each drum hit, and it's just going to space them out. You can see these transients actually line up pretty well. The only part that's weird is this part right here, and that's because that kick drum actually lasted through this hi-hat here. And when it gets chopped up with the hi-hat, you can hear it gives a little bit of a stutter thing. Let me do this again actually here. Let's delete this one. And let's make that kick drum. Here, I'm going to just take this down here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that kick drum, I'm going to make it not so long. There we go. That sounds better. Right click, freeze. Oops, hey, freeze. Drag it over, hold down Option, drag it over, and then unfreeze. There we go. So now I got this as audio, and now we can see it doesn't go into that hi-hat. What I'm looking at here is like right here. See, it doesn't, this waveform here doesn't go past the hi-hat here, whereas it was going past the hi-hat before. So now if I slow it down, oh wait. Hold on, let's a second, there we go. I'm gonna keep that one there just so we can have it as an example. I'm gonna put this back to 92, there we go. I'm gonna change this kick drum. Cool. I'm going to freeze it, drag it on over, and then unfreeze so we have it as MIDI. Now, let's take a listen. See this one here, if we take a look, see how this kick drum, you can see it's going here, 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 and it's lasting till over here. But this kick drum doesn't do that. The kick drum stops right with this hi-hat here and doesn't go through the hi-hat. So you can't see the waveform right here on the right. Whereas with this one, you can see the waveform continues through the hi-hat. See that? You can see that little wiggly line there? That's the kick drum continuing through the hi-hat. And over here, the kick drum does not continue through the hi-hat. So what that means is, what that means is that when I play this and I slow it down, let's slow it down a lot. And here, this one here, I'm going to change this around a little bit. Yeah, okay, cool. So listen to this. Sounds great. There's no like extra whoop whoop at the end with the right here with this hi-hat. And listen to this one. You can hear that kick drum. You can hear the low end going whoa, 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 whoa. You can hear it's like whoa, whoa, like that. It's getting sliced up with that transient here. So you don't want that to happen. That doesn't sound great. So my advice would be, if you're going to slow stuff down, if you know what's happening, if you understand about this stuff, then you would go through and you'd kind of mess with that kick drum to make it sound about like a little bit more correct. And you might be saying like, wow, Tony, that's a lot of work to make it sound good. And I would say, yeah. And is your music not worth sounding good? Would be my retort. So we got this. Now, if I slow it down even more, it's going to sound great. Not that one. This one. Okay? And the reason why it sounds so good is because everything is nice and separated. And the more separated stuff is, the better it's going to sound. So I'm going to put it back to 92. And let's get a little bass line thing in here. I'm going to add a little bass in here. We're going to call this one bass. How low can you go? Right? And we're going to do that. And we're going to use a, let's use a synth sound. Not that one. That one doesn't seem to want to audition for me. Yeah, we'll use this one here. Yeah, this one. So grab this one on here and I play my keyboard. Nothing happens because I didn't have my thing set for that. Hit my octave down. Okay, cool. So I got this here. What is this piano line in the key of C? Yeah. Okay. So I'll go in here. I'm going to make a nice short bass line. All right, and you can hear everything is nice and separated out. So what I can do is I can take this and I will freeze it and flatten it, turn it into audio. So now it's audio, and you can see all of my little bass hits are nice and individual. So if I hit play, all right, now let's slow it down. I'm going to change over here. I'm going to go over here to my warp mode. And I'm going to change this. It's in beats mode already. That's great. That's the default. And I'm going to say preserve. We have different options here. This is where I can set those transients to preserve. This is actually just eighth notes, so I could change it to eighth notes. But Ableton Live also did a pretty good job of finding my transients. And I say pretty good. It's not 100% accurate. You can see it's a little bit off like this. Well, it actually looks pretty good. Some of these look a little bit off to me, but maybe not. Okay, well, that looks pretty good actually. So I could mess around with that there, or I could just set this to eighth notes over here, which I'd have. And then this one here, this is your loop mode of the transient loop mode. And we want to set that to off, no looping. Set that to off, and now when I slow it down, it's going to sound completely natural. Turn this down like this. Christian says, where are you streaming from? I am streaming from Manhattan. I'm on right now. I actually have a house in Brooklyn, in Bed-Stuy, but I've been quarantining at my girlfriend's place since March, and her place is in Greenwich Village. So that's where I am right now. She was kind enough to let me take over her spare bedroom. So I have like a green screen set up in here, and I have all my studio gear and stuff in here, so I can just kind of mess around and teach these lessons and have my little cave. Yeah, no worries. So you can hear as I slow it down, right? It sounds perfect. There's no difference here. Do I only do morning streams? Yeah, because this is actually a class for SAE. So my class, because I teach at SAE, I've been teaching at SAE for like 10 years. And so this is a class from 9:30 until 2, and we stream from like 9:30 until about noon or so. So it's only in the morning. But these are also put up on YouTube. Here, let me show you where these are on YouTube. Hold on. Not you. You behave. Over here. And this is good just to keep everybody remembering to watch these videos. I put all the videos up last night. Every single video is up, in case you were wondering about that. There you go. View as. I don't want to view as a subscriber. I just want to that. There you go. I'm going to stick this down here in the chat so you can see. Everything goes up onto YouTube. There you go. So you can click on that and you can follow me on YouTube. So all the videos go up there, and there's like a whole bunch of stuff. So it's actually a pretty cool little information area, I think. All right. So we got this bass line here, and the bass line is kind of moving along, and it sounds great no matter what tempo I put it at. So I can put this with my drums. I can slow it down. I can speed it up. All the stuff. Oh, you saw it. Good, Johan. Excellent. Sorry, it took me a while to put it up because there was a lot of backlog stuff, and I have to like put a little thing in and stuff like that. So, other than Twitch, you could, I guess, just send me a, I don't know, here. I'll put my SAE email up. It doesn't last up here. So there you go, ad.grund@sae.edu. So just hit me with an email there, and we can talk, and we can figure out. Yep, cool. So, where was I? Okay, so this bass line, and the reason why it sounds so good is because beats mode is not only for beats, it's for anything that's disconnected, any kind of disconnected audio that's not super, super legato. Let me go ahead and show you what I mean by that. Here, we're gonna speed it back up to 92, and we got this here. I'm gonna play my keyboard line here. I'm gonna play. And I'm gonna play some stuff in like this. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Okay. Yeah, Christian. Yeah, just hit me up there, Christian, because that's the one I'm comfortable putting out in public right now. Hit me up there real quick, and then just put your email, and I'll hit you back from my private email. I don't really want to put my private email into Twitch because I don't know. There's, most of these people are my students, but I don't know, So just hit me an email there, and then I'll hit you back from a private email. We can talk a little bit, okay? And I'll also let you know how to get in touch with me. Cool. Thank you. And then we'll switch it over. I understand what you're saying. I just feel comfortable putting the work email in public, not the private email. All right, so I got this keyboard line here. Cool. All right, so I got that there. Now, let me go ahead and turn this into audio as well. I'm going to freeze the track. And I'm going to show you what I mean by this. I'm going to make a new audio track here. I'm going to drag that over so it's audio. And, oops, wrong thing. And then unfreeze. There we go. So I got that. Put that there. So now we can see here is my audio. And you can see there's, you can see the transients in here. We can see the transients. Let's take out some of these transient markers in here that are not necessary. And if I hit play on this, okay, so if I go ahead and slow this way down, the bass and the drums are going to still sound great, and the keyboard is going to sound a little bit wonky if I use the same settings. So I'm going to go over here to this, hit that, and now let's slow it down. Let's listen to it. Right? The reason why it sounds a little bit weird is because these notes are detaching. And remember what I said about all this stuff over here, this one here. The beats mode here, when we slow things down, it keeps the sample as a block between the transients. And then just puts like some space between those blocks. And that's why the sound is having a gap in it, because of these blocks right here. You see the blocks, these gaps? Well, that's the problem, is that these gaps are the audio, right? We're hearing them. And then also what's happening is, like right here, these are close together. So this note here is bleeding into this note, which is just a natural thing from audio. And this, but it's chopping it right here. So if we listen carefully, you can hear this chord here in here. So if I hit play, let me solo that out. Right, and so it sounds kind of weird. It doesn't sound natural. So for this one, I wouldn't use beats. I would probably use complex. Let's hear what that sounds like. Much better. Right, and the reason why complex works is because complex is very different from beats mode. Complex stretches out the whole entire sample. So for anything that's not drums, it's going to sound pretty good. Depends on how many transients you have in something. So for example, if I change this drum track here into complex, listen to what this sounds like. Like, it doesn't sound horrible, but it's not the best drum sound in the world. I prefer the beats one. The beats one doesn't try to make things longer. It's just putting them in different places. So you've got that nice crisp attack, you've got the right length of the notes, and everything sounds nice. Whereas with this complex, there's too many artifacts. Right? But for the electric piano, it sounds great. So we have this over here, and you can hear how these connect. And what I would do is here, let's put this one onto beats mode. There we go. Nice. And let's turn this bass back on. And we've got things slowed down a lot right now. The natural tempo is up here at 92, but it still sounds really crisp and clear, even if we slow it way down. And very natural sounding. That's the important part. So going back to what Mano said earlier, is that, if you start using these different warp modes and you start messing with the tempos and the pitches and stuff, you lose fidelity. But if you understand which modes to use at the right time, you can retain some of that fidelity and keep it sounding fairly natural. But you don't have to keep it natural, because natural sometimes is super boring. So if I go over here to my counting, which I did at 92, so let's put my counting back in here. let's do this.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3,
Cool.
4. 1, 2.
Okay, so I got this little vocal here. Let me turn the volume up on it.
1, 2.
Now, I can keep this sounding natural by using beats mode for this, and you might be saying, well hold on, Tony. How am I, you're using beats mode, but it's a counting thing. It's not a beat. I know it's not a beat, but watch what happens. If I put my transients at the right place here, and I'm just going to use Option to go to each next transient, Option and arrow key, remember it's what I said earlier. I'm going to go over here like this and move these over, so now the transients at the beginning of each one, okay. And I'm going to put this into beats mode because it's individual. Every word that I'm saying is its own individual little packet of sample. So put that into beats mode, change this loop here like that, and now hit go, and let's slow it down.
1, 2.
Let's first of all, let's listen to it by itself.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right.
1, 2.
Let's move this.
3, 4. 1,
There we go.
2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
See, I got to
1,
move some of these around
2,
to catch the
3,
F and the
4.
3.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1,
Cool.
2.
And if I mess
3,
with it, I can make it
4.
sound completely natural.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2.
And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to move, let's see here. I don't want to mess with that, and it's going to be a little bit, that's annoying. So let's do this. Here, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to put a warp marker here and a warp marker here and move that over.
1,
See what that sounds like.
3, 4. 1, 2,
Cool.
3, 4. 1, 2.
Okay, that sounds
3,
good.
4. 1, 2.
Okay.
3.
Now,
4,
if I slow it down even more,
2.
let's slow it down to 60.
4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right?
1.
Okay, so that's beats mode. It's starting to sound heat. Nice, thanks. But, I mean, thanks, I don't know. That's me counting. But what we can do here is change this to texture mode, and this is going to sound interesting with all those other sounds going on. So first of all, put it back in beats, and let's just listen to it with all the other instruments.
1, 2, 3.
Here, let's put it up to 70.
1, 2, 3,
Okay.
4.
Now,
1,
watch what happens when I put it into texture mode.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Put it up an octave.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right? And I think that sounds really cool and really trippy and weird. It doesn't sound natural at all, but it sounds interesting. And so sometimes it's not about making it sound natural, sometimes it's about making it sound interesting. And that still means that you need to understand what each one of these different warp modes does and how it reacts with audio, because you can reach that point a lot faster. If you're, in the beginning, it's going to take longer to achieve this because you're going to have to go through and listen to these and mess around with them. But my notes can help you out here. These are here, and then this explains all this different stuff in here. So come on, why are we, hold on a second. Come on. There we go. So it explains all the stuff we just talked about. So transient loop mode, the little logo is there, no loop, Best for drums and short detached audio. The sound retains its natural audio. Forward loop tries to fill in the audio gaps by looping forward and reverse loops. Live tries to fill in audio gaps by looping in reverse. I actually never use these two ever. Like if you're gonna do weird stuff like that, just use a different warp mode, is my opinion. Unfortunately, the default of the clip defaults to this no loop. It defaults to this reverse loop one, which I don't know if there's a way to change that or not. I should probably figure it out. Then you've got your transient envelope. Now this is kind of cool. The transient envelope, what this does, and I've used this in the footsteps over here to make the footsteps sound more interesting. Okay, let's put these into beats like this here. I'm going to put the footsteps down here. We're going to turn this off. Here. Oh no, sorry, it was the clock. It wasn't the footsteps. Here. Hold on, let me stop. Clock. Okay, so there's my footsteps. And if I have these set, so you can see here to get this real rhythmic sound, I've got it set to the 8th note here because I want that rhythm to be the 8th note. That's what the clock is doing anyway. It's doing basically an 8th note rhythm. And I set my transient loop here to no loop. And this here, my sustain, I want to turn that down to add some gap in between things. It's an unnatural gap. I'm going to make them even shorter. And you hear how cool that sounds now? Now it doesn't sound weird. When I leave the sustain all the way up, it sounds really weird. But if I turn this down, it's not a bad sound at all. And you can add the footsteps in. Turn that down as well if you wanted to. Let's put our counting back.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2,
Maybe put a little filter on these bad boys.
2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3.
Now it sounds like a dream. All right, so this is how we can use all these tools at our disposal. And you know, we've talked about EQs and stuff like that before, and it's just a matter of understanding how that stuff works, but then also pulling in the other side of it, which is the technology of the program itself, the DAW, that has these different warp modes. So tones and textures. I don't really use these that much. They're pretty cool for weird sound effects and stuff like that. They're great for sustained sounds, pianos, and not pianos, but like pad sounds and stuff like that. They anything that doesn't have a lot of transients, they're pretty good for that. They're horrible for drums. They're great for pads, and they're also cool for special effects, as you can hear with this vocal part right now. Repitch. Repitch is just like a record player or a sampler. Slower lowers the pitch, faster makes the pitch go higher. And you got Complex and Complex Pro. Complex and Complex Pro are both great for full songs, and they're also really good for repitching vocals. So like you've seen me using them for repitching vocals today. All right, one last thing to talk about with these that's really important to understand is that the different warp modes do use more or less of your computer's processor power. So if you look at this little thing right here, the lowest processor power is the repitch. That's the lowest. Beats is right next to that. So if you have a lot of your clips in beats mode or repitch mode, they're not going to use a lot of your computer's processor. Tones and textures is next up from beats, but the Complex and Complex Pro use a lot of your computer's processor. So you don't want to just throw in everything into Complex or Complex Pro. You really want to be aware of what your computer's processor is doing, and remember that's done right up here in the upper right hand corner. 1%, 2% right now I'm using. If I hit play, that jumps up to 10%. All right, so you got that right there. And so you want to keep that number, like I said, you want to keep that number down. And that number changes depending on what plugins you're using, what warp modes you're using, how many tracks you have, all those different factors. Okay, so then in here, you have the segment BPM, and that tells you the tempo of each warp marker section. And it's good for identifying the tempo of songs that you import into Ableton Live. So for example, if I go over here and I import, let's go ahead and, well, that's what that is. Okay, let's go ahead and load in a song in here real quick. Let me get some tracks. Here, let's grab a Walker and Royce track. This is a really old Walker and Royce track, one of my favorites. And if I put it in here, it's going to load it in. We can see Ableton Live is loading this in. And I'm not going to play this because then YouTube might be like copyright infringement. So I'm not going to hit play on this. But what I am going to do is I'm just going to zoom in here. I'm going to say, okay, this here says segment BPM is 160. That's actually wrong. It's actually going to be 120. So I'm going to change that because I know it's 120 because the song is at 120. And I know that it's trying to match my current tempo. That's why I put it at 60. So Ableton Live was incorrect there. But we can see here my kick drum, boom, 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 like that. You can see it's lining up with my beat here, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. And if I click on this one here, I can see my segment BPM. This is basically telling me the tempo of that part of the track between the warp markers. Now in this case, there are no warp markers here. It's just the one warp marker, so that's actually telling me the song. And then somebody says, is there any way to stretch audio by dragging the audio with the mouse? You missed that part actually. I did talk about that earlier. You can put it into your arrangement view. I can copy and paste this into my arrangement view. Here, let me do it with a different one. Here, let's do it with the footsteps. And my footsteps loop here. And if I hold down Shift, I can stretch it by just dragging it with my mouse right there. So you can see how that works right there. And that's just by holding down Shift and dragging it. But it has to be in the arrangement view. You're welcome. Okay, there we go. So this works for any kind of song. And I'm actually going to do a separate whole class, or at least a part of a class, on bringing in songs into Ableton Live and warping full songs. So I don't want to get too far into that. I just wanted to show you that right there. We're going to do a whole session on that. What else we got in here? Okay, this is kind of a little bit of a review of stuff we talked about earlier in here. But basically, whenever you drag an audio file into Live, it analyzes the audio and creates a .asd file in the same folder in your hard drive. So if I go look at my hard drive, so if I say over here, let's look at where my footsteps are. I right click on this and I go to show in Finder. I can show it in my Finder, and what happens is it shows me, oh look, I got all these .asd files in here in this folder. And the reason why I have all these .asd files in here is because I've imported these into Ableton Live at some point. You can see down here, these do not have any .asd files, and that's because I've not brought these into Ableton Live ever. So the ASD, I'm pretty sure that stands for, ASD stands for Ableton Session Data. You were holding down the control button. Yeah, I've done that before. It stands for Ableton Session Data, or Ableton Save Data. I'm not sure which one, but it's probably one of those. It doesn't really matter whatever it stands for. The point is that it's basically data that only Ableton Live uses. So if you're using stuff, if you see these in your hard drive, do not delete them. They're your friend. Just be nice to them and treat them kindly, and they will continue to be your friends. Do not delete them though, because if you delete them, if anything that you want to save with this file will not be saved with it. And so what I can do is I drag it in and it analyzes the file, and if I move it around, you can see here, this footsteps here, put this back to normal tempo. These footsteps sound different from these footsteps right here. Right, the rhythm is different. That's because I changed the rhythm. You can see I've changed the rhythm right here. Well, if I want to use these footsteps in other sessions, okay, let me pause right there for a second. If I just save this session right now, here, I'll save it. And if I open this, if I close it and I open it up again, which I'm not going to do because that takes time, these footsteps will all show up with the different rhythms and stuff like that set, because the session is saved, and it saves all, like this one has this rhythm, and this one has this rhythm, and this one has this rhythm. All these different rhythms are set up, and that's in the session. But if I wanted to save the footsteps with this rhythm that's currently on my screen, right there, if I want to save it with that's currently on my screen, and I want to drag it into another session, if I want to use these footsteps in a bunch of, let me say like, yeah, this footstep sound is so dope, this is going to be the next Jersey club, you know, squeaky bed sound, right? I want to use footsteps for that, and I want it to be in all my songs. Great, no problem. And I want it to be this rhythm here, right? Well, then what I can do is I can click the save button right over here, the save button right here. I click it, and it saves that into the .asd file. So now if I drag those footsteps into another session from my computer or from my browser or wherever, it's going to be this rhythm right here. So this is great if you want to use Ableton Live to DJ with, or if you want to mess with some samples and you want to just save them for a rainy day or whatever, you can do that. And it just hit the save button right over here. But be aware, it is going to change. It's not going to load up like this anymore, just straight up. It's going to load up like this other rhythm. So maybe what I want to do is just say this is a straight up rhythm, okay? So just be aware that that is a thing. Zephyr, you are here. Also, Zephyr, you need to start showing up to the Zoom class, dude. That's, you're kind of slipping there, buddy. So we need to talk about that. And also, I don't think we've done the one-on-one meeting. I don't remember if we did that or not at this point. But if you don't, that's also not great. So, all right, so do not delete that file. If you make changes to the audio file's clip, those changes are saved with the session, not the clip. So if you drag that same audio file, basically what I just said, it will not save those changes. If you want the changes to apply to that audio file in the other sessions, you must save them to the .asd file, and that's right here. It's just a little graphic for you. When you import songs into Live, modern songs will not need much work. Older songs will probably need some work to make sure that the files work. We're going to talk about that more on another day. Okay, so this part here is kind of like what I said. Like I said, I want to talk about this on another day. I don't want to get into this right now because it's like a little bit too far for this lesson. I want to get y'all used to messing with these. One last thing I just want to make sure you understand. This is the part, this is a thing that everybody kind of gets confused about or gets mixed up about, is that there's a grid in here. And I want you to see this. Here's my drum beat. Let's go ahead and close this. And we can see that the little playhead is moving around the grid. And this is like the same as the grid in Logic or Pro Tools when you're messing with the MIDI clips and stuff like that. And it's running through the clip down here. Well, this grid is super, super important. So if I wanted, here, let me just move my over here, start point over here. Okay. If I want to move this one here to a different rhythm, I'm going to change it to my 30-second notes. I'm just going to click and drag it like that. Boom. Right, so we can see here, I can move all this stuff around. Whoops. And what I'm doing is I'm just moving this around to the grid that's up across the top here. Now, this grid and this timing over here, the segment BPM we just talked about, has nothing to do with the timing of the session. The session timing is up here in the upper left-hand corner, right up here. And this what determines how fast or slow your song is. So you gotta imagine it like this. Your clip is a container, and that container has a grid inside of it. And the audio fits with that grid of the container. That container is just going 1, 2, 3, 4, and it could be doing it fast, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, or it could be doing it slow, 1, 2, 3, 4. That fastness or slowness is determined up here in the top, but the grid itself inside the container doesn't care if it's fast or slow. It's just like, I'm going. And then the audio connects to that grid. So the audio connects to the container of the clip, and then the clip gets its tempo from the session tempo up top. And that's super, super important because a lot of people get confused about like, well, my song says it's at 100, but my tempo up top says 120. Does that mean they're not going to match? And the answer is no, it doesn't mean they're not going to match. But you have to connect up your song to the grid in the clip first and make sure that part matches, and then you can change the tempo. If you don't have that connected, this tempo up here is still going to speed it up and slow it down, but things aren't going to be locked into place together. And that's the important part. So if I have my little beat here that hold on, let's go ahead and put all these back to where they were. Actually, I'm just going to do it like this. There we go. Slow it down a little bit. Now let's grab, just so I can show you how you can fit other stuff into this, let's grab some other little loops and things real quick. I'm just going to make a couple more loops, and we're just going to call this one here loop 1, and this one's going to be loop 2, like that, and I'm going to make them go to my drum group. If you haven't noticed, I've had everything going to my drum group this entire time, and I've had a little, some effects on it to make it sound nice, to make the drums nice and punchy. If you thought they sounded like that naturally, you are mistaken. That is not how they sound naturally. So I've got this here, the loop 1, loop 2, and now we're just going to go in here and find some loop 1, loop 2 things. Let's go to our sample phonics, and let's go to, let's grab some beat making essentials. Let's get some beat making essentials. Some drums. These are like full-on drums. I don't want full-on drums. Let's beat weirdness. What is in here? Some tops. Yeah, let's get some hi-hat stuff. Okay, so these are all around. No. Oh, bongo tech. Here we go, bongo stuff. Okay, let's grab some bongos from 128 BPMs. And you might say, but Tony, hold on. How is a bongo from 128 BPM going to sound good with this? And well, it's because, right, there's that. Square bongo. Yeah, let's grab here. Let's grab that one. So there's that. And now, let's put that at 128, because it's not 65. Hey, 128. There we go. So now, the reason why this is going to sound good is because I'm going to set my beats down here to what we just talked about. I'm going to set this to this, and make sure it's in transient mode. There we go. Cool. And now I hit go. Awesome. Now the cool thing about this is, and one thing we haven't really talked about, is I can quantize this rhythm quite easily. I just click on it and I hit go, Command U, and it quantized it all. There you go. And let's get rid of this one here. We don't need that. I'm just going to get rid of some of these little bleeps and bloops. These are just like artifacts. Yeah, there we go. Much better. And you put this with the drums and all the other stuff, you're not even going to notice it, that it sounds a little bit wonky. There we go. Stop you. Oh, this one was not going to. Ah, sneaky. Sneaky drums. Electric piano. Come on. There we go. So now, cool. Nice. That sounds pretty good. I want to put a little reverb on it to make it sound even better, but you get the idea. And I think that's it for today. So what I want to do is let's take a 20-minute break. Come back to Zoom at noon, so you can have plenty of time to stretch it out, and then we'll kind of go over this stuff as a class and see what kind of questions y'all have. All right.